I just want to take a minute to talk about JavaScript, something that keeps all of us up at night, of course, and communicating with a backend, right? So if you ever want to do a SPA, which is a single page application for JavaScript, you're going to have to utilize something called fetch, okay? Let's go ahead and take a look at, well, we can't really take a look because this is more of like a rant, but I'm taking a look at the JavaScript fetch functionality. So you can do CRUD with it. So if you want to do CRUD using fetch and JavaScript, you have to make sure that you're going to utilize the config provided in the, I guess, fetch function, just so you can utilize the whole asynchronous JavaScript functionality. But in your config, you want to make sure that you specify that you're going to use a post, or that your method itself is going to be a post. You need to include your headers so that you know what kind of data is being sent back and forth, and then you need to stringify the JavaScript with the body, or you need to stringify the body using JSON.stringify, and then your object that you want to stringify. So you can create. You can also read as well. So to read, instead of sending a post request, you're not going to specify anything. And for the fetch functionality, you don't have to specify the configuration. But if you choose not to, it's going to be assumed that it's going to be a read function. Yeah. So generally, what it's going to do is it's going to go to that particular location within your database, and then it's going to retrieve all the necessary data within that particular route, and hopefully you did utilize RESTful routing. And in which case, once you do that, then the promise that you get back, you're going to further process it to JSON, which is what I recommend doing. And then once you get another promise back, which should be like your collection of objects in JSON, you can then further process that. Generally, it'll be like an array, but you can further process that using something like .forEach to iterate through it better, and then kind of decide what you want to do with the components moving forward. And then what I would recommend doing is I would recommend having like your main object, and then using the data that you get back from the fetch to convert the individual components to parameters of the object to create an actual object. And then upon the creation of the objects, utilize one of like the methods to decide what you want to do with it. In my opinion, when it comes to editing and deleting, like going forward, this really comes in handy. And it makes the process a whole lot easier and streamlined. And then when we talk about updating, right? Updating, fairly simple. You just, it's the same thing. You're gonna fetch to a particular route, you're gonna mention the configurations, and then you're gonna specify that the method's gonna be a patch request, that the header is going to accept and send JSON, and then that the body is going to be stringifying the actual card object that you had just previously created that we had mentioned earlier. Very simple process. While I don't recommend having or whatever object, I said card, but whatever object you want. So I recommend keeping your objects local within each function, due to the fact that it can get kind of confusing. Sometimes you run out of names. I always run out of names for my variables. But so upon the configuration, since you are building a single page application, you're going to want to do a live refresh. And well, at least I imagine you would. Assuming you want to do a live refresh, I would then recommend doing the .then method, and then getting that promise, and then converting that to JSON, and then getting another promise so that you can further process that data. And then upon the further processing, you're going to take those, once again, like we mentioned earlier, take those individual components and then put those into parameters for a new object. I keep saying card because that's what I did my project on, but any sort of object that you had created, just be sure you specify the parameters, and then you use that to create, use the methods within that object. You can use the instance that you just created, to access the methods of that particular object that you had just created, or that classification, if that's easier. and then, and hopefully within that you have a live refresh method, or live refresh instructions. And then delete's fairly simple. You just you set the config. Let's start off with the fetch. You make a fetch request to a particular URL, and if you did utilize RESTful routing, it should be whatever your base URL is. So localhost / cards, in my case, / the number of the card that you're hoping to delete. And then you want to be sure to specify the configurations as well. So method.delete, or well, method delete, method's the key value, delete, method's the key, deletes the value, and then the header, which is, you know, the type of data you can be sending back and forth, but generally that's it. You're basically done. That's the part. After that, you're basically good to go. And then next, to get rid of the object off the bat, what you can do is you can event.target whatever you're trying to delete, and then just remove it using just basic JavaScript functionality in vanilla JavaScript. So this was my quick little rant on CRUD using JavaScript and fetch. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something new. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to answer them. I'm trying to look at the camera. The camera's right here. So if I'm looking this way, I'm looking at myself talking to you guys. Yeah.